What's up, everyone? Thanks for joining me again. Welcome back to the channel. Appalachian ADV Rider here, bringing you a full review of this knife right here. The Chaves Redencion 229 Kickstop. Man, I like this knife. If anybody's been following this channel, you know it. Yeah, this has quickly become one of my favorite knives. I've had it maybe since November. It's now January 2024, so I might have had it no more than 2 months, but it's just been dominating my pocket, and I don't see it going anywhere anytime soon. It's just the size of the knife that I like. So let's just talk a little bit about this thing. First of all, this is the Kickstop edition. Now, I have my hand here. I was going to try to hold it, the knife, but I had an operation on my hand. And the Chaves emblem is the skull and key. And you got the Lee Williams Kickstop emblem right there. This is an Ultramar series knife, which when you see the name Ultramar, that means it's made in China by Riot. Ramon Chaves' affordable line of knives, he's farmed that out to Riot, which is one of the premier knife makers in China. They supposedly have very good quality, Riot. I mean, I don't know. This is the only knife. I've got two of these Chaves knives. They were both made from Riot. So I only have two Riot knives, and they're both excellent quality. So I have absolutely no complaints. I would prefer if it was USA made, but this knife was, I think, retails for $410. And part of that is because the license, they have to pay to use the Kickstop license. So some of it's going to one of the creators of this knife. Let's just get into the size. The cutting edge, so let me move this over. I'm going to put the specs of this knife right here, hopefully. Cutting edge is 3.25 inches. The blade length on this is 3.63 inches. The knife close is 4.5 inches. The open length, or the overall length to this knife, is about 8.25 inches. Weight on this is a very respectable 6.7 ounces. It's made out of M390 steel, and I think, yeah, here it is on the side. This is Bowler M390. It's made. It's a European formula of the 20CV, and 204P is a very similar composition. This knife has a beautiful compound grind. So compound grind is when you see the two different grind angles. So this, from here to here, this is a hollow grind, and from here, the tip is a flat grind. So the advantage to this kind of a grind is that you can get a relatively thick stock to get really thin, because a hollow grind grinds away material very, very quickly. The slope of the angle is very, very steep at the beginning of the grind, and then it narrows out and thins out to a very long, almost like a flat grind at this point down here. So it gets really sharp. This knife is extremely sharp for how thick it is. So this is a great grind, and I've said it in several videos before. I'm going to say it again. I think every knife going forward, I would want this grind. It's just that good. I kind of like having. There's some people that just like a really slicey knife, and I get it. So here's like a slicey knife, quiet carry, drift. It's a flat grind. It's really, really tall. It's really thin blade stock. And if I had it back here, let me see. You see the blade stock is so much thinner, so you can get the edge, really thin here and make that a really slicey knife. But this one is so thick that in order to get it slicey, you would need this hollow grind, and that's what they did. So you're able to get a thick stock with a really slicey belly, and because the tip is a flat grind, you can get a very, very stout tip. I mean, this thing is pretty thick all the way to the end, really. I mean, it's got a really good thickness there. I like it. This knife has every screw here is a T8. So the pivot, the body screws, and the clip screw, and even the lock bar screw, all T8. This has a steel lock bar insert with a internal over travel stop. so you can't overextend this knife when you open it. The screws, the scale screws go all the way through the back spacer and through the other scale. So the screws coming out through the back side of this titanium scale. So you have steel screws going through titanium, which shouldn't be a problem if you don't strip it, right? I mean, there's obviously a higher risk of stripping this screw in titanium, but just got to be careful. You know, if you don't gorilla tighten it, there's no risk. So another high level thing about this knife, just an overall view of this knife, it really only has one deployment method, and that's the Kickstop. It's a flipper. You can only open it by using a flipper. The advantage to it being a flipper is there's no thumb studs getting in the way of the cutting path. And there's no flipper tab at the bottom, so you can get the knife closer down to the material that you're cutting. So if there was a flipper tab extending way down below here, it will prevent the knife from like touching the table. And then another thing about this knife is it's a pretty plain knife. It's just a solid slab of titanium. Oh yeah, there's no internal milling also. So these are definitely solid slabs of titanium. So this is a heavy knife. So there's no weight reduction effort. It took a little while for this knife to grow on me because I had hyped it up so much in my head. And when it came in, it was just a knife. But you know, as a knife, this is a great knife. I'm telling you, it's just confidence inspiring, and I just love that grind. This thing kind of reminds me of a Benchmade Adamas. So here's an Adamas. It's a smaller knife, but if anybody knows anything about this knife, it's like a stocky, purpose-built knife. That's what this knife is. So just a larger. So this is the mini Adamas. So I don't have the larger Adamas. I mean, this might be the same. I don't know how it compares to a larger Adamas. But anyway, the point is, this design reminds me of an Adamas. It's the only thing I can compare it to that's in my collection. So this knife also has a kickstop. So what is a kickstop? So kickstop is this flipper tab, and it's independent of the blade tang. Usually a flipper tab would be attached to the bottom of the blade tang, and it would act as a finger guard when you flipped it out, and it would act like a flipper when you closed it. This kickstop thing is something that, and I'm sorry, this would normally be easier to do with two hands, but you can see how this thing here is just, this flipper tab is independent of the blade. So you do get an additional sound when using this knife from that thing clicking and clanking around and the action of the blade. So what I love about this knife is the amazing action and that kickstop. That deployment method is just amazing. I mean, I love the weight of this knife. If you like a heavy knife, like I do, this is a good sized knife. It feels, confidence inspiring. It's substantial. It feels like you got a knife on you. Another thing I like about this knife is its plain looks. It's just grown on me. It's simple. It is a tool. It's a knife, basically. And it does knife things really good. I love that this thing gives me a sense that it's all business. It kind of reminds me of a spike, essentially. It's like a really compact design, very short and stubby, but thick, right? It is really good. I have absolutely no complaints. The ergonomics on this knife is really good. It's just a slab, but my hand just fits right in there. I have a double XL hand and fits the knife very nicely. And that clip, you don't feel that pocket clip at all. There's just no hot spots from that pocket clip. I love that. I like this knife doesn't have a double clutch. Clears the detent bowl, no problem, right away. Got a smooth action. Action on this thing is just really tuned very nice. It's got great sounds too. I love playing with this knife and hearing the sounds. I think the grind work too. I love the grind work. I think it's just beautiful. It's gorgeous. That satin finish. Wow. when I first got it, I wasn't so crazy about it, and the whole thing's just grown on me. The whole knife. Like I said, first time I got it, I don't know, I was a little underwhelmed by it. I've already mentioned it, but I'll mention it real quickly. What I like about it, since I'm talking about my likes, is the compound grind. Love the fact that you can have a hollow grind and a flat grind in the tip, giving it slicing ability and a strong tip. I like that this knife is a slab of titanium. I like its thickness. It's chunky, and I like it. I like that when you deploy it, the flipper tab disappears, right? It's a clean look. But if it had one, if it didn't really, it wouldn't bother me, but I'm going to call that as a like. I'm calling it out. And I like that there's no thumb stud, and there's no thumb stud in the way of the cutting path. I really like the opening. It's a great opening to the lock bar. I can get my big fat thumb right in that opening right there. It's not too strong to pull back. It's just right. Really like that. I like that it has a steel lock bar insert. Titanium frame locks on steel tang on a blade is fine, but ideally I prefer steel on steel. It's going to last longer. Not that I use my knife a lot, but not only will it last longer, but if somehow it wore out and it changed the geometry enough, you can technically send this in and they can replace the steel lock bar. Though it's made in China, so I'm not sure if that really applies, right? But I'm going to put that in the like column that has a steel lock bar insert. You can decide whether that matters to you or not, right? And as I mentioned, it has an over travel stop, which is something you want in a knife. Titanium doesn't remember its position as well as steel does. So you can literally bend titanium out of its place. So it wouldn't keep the same tension. So this prevents you from bending it out too much. So that's a good thing. Definitely a good thing. Another thing I love is this area right here. When this knife is partially open, this frame lock exactly matches the scale. And for me as a tactile person, I like the feel of this. This is also the frame lock where it's cut very, very high. And that gives this knife great blade to handle ratio. So this is another thing. I'm not going to really get into depth, but basically what that means is that a blade can never be longer than the handle. So ideally, you want the blade to be as close to the same length as the handle as possible. This has a very good blade to handle ratio. I love that it has absolutely no blade play, no blade rock, no anything. Nothing to complain about. No side-to-side movement, no up and down movement, nothing. And I think Riyadh does a good job in this stonewash. I like this finish. It'll hide scratches and wear marks, even though I like, scratches and wear marks, but it would make it look like it's just part of the knife. So stonewash is a great finish, in my opinion. And finally, what I love about this knife is that it's just confidence inspiring when you cut with it. It is, don't know how to describe it to you, but you have so much control on this knife, especially as you're cutting through cardboard. You can really, like for me, I can really crank on this thing and turn on a dime and feel I can go down using the tip into cardboard, or I can use the belly, or I can go from the belly to the tip. And it's just very confident. It's just a very confident cutter. It's a great knife. It's a great hard to use knife that can cut confidently, which is a rare breed. And as with any knife, there's always going to be some things we don't like about a knife design, right? So let's just get into the negatives. What I see is the things that I don't like. One of the things that it's not really good from a design perspective is that this scale is flat and smooth, and it gets slick. It's slippery. If your hands sweat even just a little bit, and I'm not a sweaty kind of guy, but every once in a while I might have some sweat, and you grab this knife and it's pretty slippery. And because it has this Kickstop design, there's no flipper tab here, so you have no nothing preventing your hand from slipping forward. I mean, you do have this jimping on the blade, and you can try to like lock your hand in there using that, but there's nothing preventing you really, from physically from sliding your hand forward on this knife. So that I'm going to call that a negative, right? What I'm going to call negative is the slippery part, and because it's slippery and it doesn't have a finger guard, I think that makes the slippery aspect of this knife a little bit more dangerous. Like, if it had a finger guard there, there's no chance you're going to slide forward no matter what. It could slip out of your hand, but if this thing slides forward and you're holding it, you're going to slice your hand open really, really good. So it's just something I'm pointing out. Is it going to happen? Most likely not, right? The point is, it's a flipper without a flipper tab there. You judge if that's good or bad. One of the other things about this knife that I'm going to call as a dislike, even though for me, I'm not sure, how it's going to affect me. There's really no sharpening choil here. Here's your plunge grind. It kind of ends right where the blade begins, but it's just a weird design. It's not really flat because it does come down a little bit there. I don't know. If you look at some of the knives, like let me see, do I have it here? Yeah. Here's the Street, which I reviewed tonight, and hopefully you'll get to watch that one too. So there'll be reviews on both of these knives. You see this sharpening choil here, and it comes way past the plunge line. I mean, that's great for, the users that are going to use this knife like crazy and going to sharpen it a lot, right? That's not going to be me. Just because, I'll use this knife a lot, but I'm going to cut paper, and I'm going to strop it first, and I'll probably strop it 20 times or 30 times before I'll ever need to sharpen this thing, because I'm not going to, chip the edge, because I'm not really doing anything that's going to chip the edge to it. For most of the time, I'm not doing anything that'll chip that edge. Another thing I'm going to call as a negative is that your fingers are kind of far away from where the blade starts, right? There's a gap there. Now, some people that bothers, so to me, it doesn't really bother me. I'm pointing it out though, so you can't choke up on it. I've seen some people talk about putting their finger up here. That's not real comfortable. I don't really think that's entirely safe. I wouldn't recommend that, but neither here or there. That's that. So there is this kind of like indentation here that suggests your hands, go right there. And for me, that's great. It feels really good. And when I put my hand there, my thumb falls right on the jipping here. I feel that this knife is really secure in my hand, but it is very far away from the end of that blade. So I'm pointing that out. Another thing about this knife, all the corners came in really sharp. When I say corners, I mean, these things here, all these corners, terribly sharp, and especially at the butt of the blade. Like when you go to close it, I wedge the bottom of the knife into my palm when I'm closing it sometimes, depending on how I grip it, right? And that was just digging into my hand big time. I think that was the major one was down here, if I remember correctly. But, I pulled out my Dremel and some green compound and a little buffing wheel and went to town, and I just kind of tapped the corners down until I felt, that I didn't really feel a hot spot. I like carrying my knives, and I don't like that there was a hot spot there. It's very uncomfortable. Another thing I'm going to say about dislike to this knife is the way this pocket clip works. I am not commenting on its looks. It is what it is. I will say that I wish that the screws were on the underneath of the scale as opposed to the top, but this really doesn't even bother me. The skull clip doesn't bother me. The screws on the top here really doesn't bother me. I would prefer that they weren't there, but it doesn't bother me. But what does bother me is the clip doesn't work very well. This knife is it's not real easy to get in and out of your pocket. And I want a knife to be easy to get in and out of my pocket. I might need to grab this thing quickly and confidently, and I don't want to lose even a second because of the poor design. Yeah, I mean, it looks great, and I love that, right? I mean, but I'm carrying a knife because I wanted it as a tool. Now, I will talk about the fidget factor, and I do like fidgeting with a knife, but at the end of the day, I'm carrying a knife because it's a tool. And I want to be able to, carry the tool easily. I want to be able to have it go in and out of my pocket easily. That's me. And if you're like me, you're not going to like that part of this clip. It's very, very comfortable in the hand, but it doesn't, if you have really thick pants, this is miserable to get in and out of your pocket. I'm going to put that down as a dislike. So I'm going to summarize this thing. At the end of the video, I want to give you a quick synopsis of what's this knife for, and if I like it or not, right? And this is a heavy, slippery knife that isn't easy to deploy in and out of your pocket. So in a tactical role, I would say this is not a great knife, just for those reasons alone. And as an EDC knife, man, it's not that great as an EDC knife either, right? It's heavy, it's thick, it's not a Warncliffe, and it's not a sheep's foot. Those two blades are a much better blade design for EDC tasks than this is. So it's not even a great EDC knife. But at the end of the day, I love this knife, and that may not make sense, right? But it's just something I love. My biggest drawback about this knife is the way it goes in and out of my pocket. It's not my favorite. So a lot of times I'll just throw it in my pocket. And so I overcome my biggest objection. And I like this as an EDC knife because when I carry a knife, I like to have a knife that's capable and that can also open packages and bubble wraps and, items you buy in the store that you need to open up, right? So this knife will do that. It won't do it the greatest. It won't slice open a box the greatest. But if I was in a dire situation, I think this knife, would be a lot more capable than, let's say, this knife. All right. Let's go ahead and do some comparisons. I'm going to start this comparison with the knives closed and the pocket clip down. So what does it compare to? Here's a paramilitary 2. So these are all this. So I would consider this a larger size knife, right? So these are my larger size knives, and they're all kind of, I kind of hesitate doing these comparisons because in my mind, if a knife is, that much different in length, is it really different? And to me, the answer is no. But, I don't know. I'm doing it anyway. Here's a comparison. Hope you enjoy it. What do we have here? We have an XM18. We got a SOCOM Bravo Elite. Of course, my beautiful Chaves 229 Kickstop. Paramilitary 2 with Flightanium scales. And Sebenza 31. And a Super Freak. So this knife is really, as you see, it's in this size range. It's a big knife. It falls in very comfortably in this territory here with all these other big knives. Thank you for joining me. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Please like the video and check out my playlist. I got a lot of knife reviews and other content in there. So thanks again. I really enjoyed talking to you, and I will see you another time.